Okay, brilliant. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Becky. I head up the business intelligence team that sits within the ICB, supporting right across the system. I'm going to demo a end-of-life dashboard that we've developed with you today. It sits currently on our business intelligence platform, which is BIP for short, and that's where we put lots of the reports that we develop for the system on here, and my team kind of manage the access to it. And we find, because it's web-based, you don't need to log in or anything like that. It's just a web link, and it's really easy to kind of get access to. There are lots of platforms available, and I'm very conscious of that. So I'm talking to you today about a report that's on BIP, but we know we also have our Cypher platform, and colleagues might already have access to that. But I'm going to talk about BIP today. There are other platforms. What we say in our team is don't worry too much about all the tools that are available in the toolbox. We've got a good idea of what spanners and wrenches are in there. Please do always contact our team, and we'll point you to the best, most suitable tool for the use case that you've got, basically. So don't worry too much about that, but I will kind of cover off access at the end and give you a link as well that, to get access to the dashboard. So without further ado, we developed this some time ago now with the end of life group. We've got clinicians on that group. I'm not sure if I haven't spotted any colleagues in the chat yet today, but Sinead Clark, a couple of other GPs have been involved in the work historically. I'll go through the demo and I'll work through some of the screens. I'm going to tailor it today. There are other screens available in the report that look at kind of system level view. So if you're kind of in a role when you want to see the kind of Cheshire and Merseyside overview, or you work in a place and you want to see, you know, the entirety of Sefton, you can do that in the report. But I think most of the people here today are from individual practices or PCN, so I'm really going to focus and make the most of the time that we've got today with you. Please do pop your hands up. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat. It's much easier for me to see hands and answer questions as we go, but I will keep an eye in the chat as well. I'll leave that open.
I'll let you know if I see anybody.
Thank you very much, Kath. I'll leave it open. Okay, so this is what the business intelligence portal looks like. Kind of colours and branding all matched to the ICB branding, so we make sure we go through a pretty committee when we publish our report to make sure they all look good and kind of meet accessibility needs and things like that. So you'll see on the left-hand side our menu, and that's all the different reports that we have. I'm just going to focus on our end-of-life report today, which sits in the primary care section. We've got a report hierarchy, and it sits in primary care. Every report that we build on the platform that our analysts build always has something called an about page that tells you a little bit of the background to it, and a definitions and support page. They are always worth having a good look at before you start to kind of explore what's in there, and then you can get some of the background to it. Doesn't cover absolutely everything, but probably enough to get you kind of started. And then once you work through the report screens, there's sometimes some additional information on there. So the About page for this report talks a little bit about how the report was developed, where the data comes from, and how it's populated. So it is populated from clinical systems for all practices who signed up to our data sharing agreement. There's 3 practices who haven't out of the whole of Cheshire and Merseyside. So we've got most people covered in there. And it's about enabling place-based partnerships or primary care networks and general practice to understand how well we're doing at identifying patients at end of life, and looking at coding, the use of codes, so that, you know, EPACS records kind of can be, you know, that they're kind of correct and accurate. It also has a number of uses at kind of a more strategic level, at Cheshire and Merseyside level. So, you know, Dave Nuns is our kind of our program lead for end of life. Dave can kind of understand any kind of themes, patterns, or trends at kind of place levels as well. So it tries to do all things to all people. Doesn't do absolutely everything. It doesn't break all the way down to individual patient level. You'd have to go into your own clinical system to do that. But it does give you an idea of perhaps where to look at some kind of improvement work, or just get an idea of how well you're doing. The data is updated every quarter, so we run off search extracts from clinical systems where we've got the permissions to do that, and then we kind of auto-populate the report. So the report's got a number of kind of tables and graphics in there that you can kind of navigate through and try and understand performance against those kind of some key metrics that we've developed and agreed with the end of life program group that we thought were the best ones to kind of to look at. So I will just scroll down on the about page and show you a little bit around what those metrics are. We're looking over a 12-month period about patients who've been identified as being on the gold standards framework, patients identified as having an advanced care plan, those patients identified as having a CPR discussion or decision, and then an overarching metric that looks at the proportion of deaths of patients where they were identified as being on all three of the kind of metrics above, trying to get an overall kind of sense around end-of-life care planning. Like I say, it's a 12-month kind of rolling period, so you can get a decent enough sample of records, especially once you go down to practice level, and it's looking at patients who have already passed away. So it's kind of more of a retrospective kind of look at our coding. Okay, so I will quickly just skirt over the first couple of screens because I think they're kind of more for looking at the kind of understanding at kind of more system level and place level what we look like for those 4 metrics that are just kind of introduced. But you get to start to understand the flavour of how things are set out, where we've got a number of drop downs, a number of filters where you can select different levels of geography as you go. And every time you click a checkbox, the data changes. Just be careful. I've selected Cheshire East there and Halton was already selected. I need to click Halton again to deselect it. And you can see on the right-hand side, all the numbers and all the chart visuals start to change automatically as you work your way through that. I'll just do that again so you can see. I'll select Cheshire West this time and deselect Cheshire East, and you'll see the numbers start to change there. You do this exactly the same when you then select PCN, and exactly the same when you go down to a practice level. And you can also focus in on a particular quarter of the year, and they're arranged in financial quarters rather than calendar quarters of the year, but we've put the names of the months in there, so just as a prompt, so you can get a sense of how on a page how a particular place, PCN or practice, is doing for a particular metric, and the metric that's defaulted at the top is the percentage of deaths where the patient was identified as being on the gold standard framework. That is probably a useful page if you just wanted to look at one particular metric for one particular geography, be that place, PCN or practice. But I think with the feedback we'd had around testing, that's quite a bit of clicking to kind of click through and work through each individual metric and each individual geography that you wanted to kind of look at. But I wanted to show you it in case there was a particular metric that you wanted to focus in on or a particular level of geography. But I think the ones that are more interesting are the screens where we can do some comparisons of the 4 metrics that we talked about for a particular place, for the latest quarter, or any quarter for that matter that you select. Out of the list, I've just selected the most recent one, which is Q1 of the current financial year, which is April to June. And we've got the metric comparison here that's just stacking up. By default, I've got Liverpool Place selected, and it's looking at the PCNs within Liverpool Place and comparing how they look for each of those 4 metrics. If you look next to each, I'll just make it slightly bigger. There's a zoom button just here. That's a good point actually to make, that we can make the report a little bit bigger if it's a little bit small on your screens when you're back in practice. And the grey bars allow you to scroll up and down here. For the PCNs, you can see that a name there. There's a small plus symbol in a box there. That allows us to then expand out and drill down into those. Now you may want to look at the particular practices within a particular PCN against the other PCNs in Liverpool, and that screen allows you to do some of that stuff. So the PCN metric comparison screen is quite helpful for some of the PCN metrics. You've got all 4 metrics that we're looking at. You've got a time period, and then you can drill down all the way down to the practices within that PCN and just see it in tabular format. We've had feedback that some people prefer to see things in charts and hover over and understand what the value was, and some people like to see it in tables. So we've done both basically. So it's just sometimes a slightly different view of the same information. It's more just kind of personal preference than anything else. If you hover over anything, any of the particular kind of cells within a table, you can see exactly what you've selected. So, for that particular metric that we've looked at, Islington House within Anfield and Everton PCN, which is within Liverpool Place. We're looking at the percentage deaths where patient was identified as being on the GSF, and we can see the value is 34.21. So you can always kind of check that what you're kind of looking back at. You can do plenty of work around kind of how you view the information. So if that's, that feels a little bit busy for you, you can change some of these menus at the top. I won't go into loads of detail about this because most of this report is set up and optimized for you to be able to kind of export it out as a PDF, which I'll show you exactly how to do in a couple of clicks in a second. But if you were and you wanted to use this kind of as a live kind of report in meetings or anywhere within your practice, you're talking to other people and just kind of want to focus on this, perhaps this table, you can do things like turn it into full screen, which just makes it a bit cleaner and less busy. You haven't got all the menus across the top and across the side. And you can always go back using the back arrow here to go through any of the other screens. And then press the escape key on your keyboard and it will reset the view all the way back. If you've been kind of playing around with filters and got a little bit lost, which does happen from time to time, lots of information in there, you can always reset. This is always a really good button here. It looks like a back kind of symbol, and it will reset any filters, slices, or data view changes that you've made, because sometimes you can get a little bit click happy and end up clicking something in particular on a chart. You can click a particular bar and you can see how that's faded out all the other values. Sometimes that's helpful in a busy chart when you've got lots of information. You think, just want to really hone in on Q4 of 2022-23. Just brings that really into focus. If I click it again, it turns it off. It's just a visual thing just to kind of help you focus. Excuse me. So that's everything I think I'm going to cover on the PCN metric comparison, where you can look in tables. I think the ones that are really of interest to you will be these report pages. And this is, like I say, where you can hone in to your particular practice or PCN and produce a report, an exportable report that you can insert into other things or use elsewhere, email across to your colleagues, for example. So we've got different levels set for different geographies for people who work at different levels. I'm going to skip right past the Cheshire and Merseyside level one, but I'll let you see it quickly. That allows us to look at all of our 9 places within Cheshire and Merseyside and stack those up and have a look at them. So if you're working in kind of a Cheshire and Merseyside level, you might find that of interest. Again, all the same 4 metrics that we're looking at, but the geography and the breakdown is just slightly different. Got the same again at place level. Exactly the same, except this time you've got a place drop down, so you can select a particular place of interest. At the moment it's set to Halton, so I'm going to leave it on there, and you get to see the 4 metrics over time, because I think time trend is quite important to understand, is anything getting any better or any worse? Is it things changing? Is the need changing in your population? But it's also really important to be able to benchmark and stack up, for the latest time period. How do you look against other neighbours who might be demographically similar to you? So that's exactly what the place level report is doing. I'm going to skip past that and take you into the PCN level. Again, looks really similar, and that's deliberate so that you're kind of working down the hierarchies of place and those geographies. So same again, except you've got your 4 metrics there, and we've got 2 drop downs now. So if you select a place first, I'm just going to select, I'll select Sefton this time, and then you can select you can see that everything's gone blank. Don't worry, that's because we were previously set to a Cheshire place, and it's looking for Cheshire PCN, which doesn't exist in Sefton. As soon as you change the drop down, you'll be able to look at the different PCN Sefton. So I'm going to click South Sefton, and everything comes back up. Just a note, I guess, to kind of build your confidence around this, you can't break anything in here. If you kind of go through some wrong steps and think, oh, I've made a right hash of that and I can't see what it was I was looking for, I think the reset button is probably the best one to click and kind of start again and reset your filters. You can't change, in a good way, any of the underlying data. That's all kind of protected underneath in the security model. You can't edit any of these numbers in here in a good way, so everything is set as it is, and it will refresh every quarter when the next quarter's data comes in. From time to time, we do make modifications. We might get some feedback around, labeling that's difficult to read and might make something bigger or provide some numbers above the chart so you know what you're looking at. But other than that, we're not planning to change in this particular phase of the report. Excuse me. So we've selected Sefton Place and selected South Sefton PCN within that. Like I say, we've got our 4 metrics here of interest. And then as we scroll down, each of those 4 metrics is underneath each other. So starting with the percentage of patients identified as being on the gold standard framework, so a time trend for South Sefton PCN, and then a benchmark comparison for South Sefton PCN for the other PCNs within that place. You can then look at a comparison for that metric. Next metric down is the percentage of patients identified as having an advanced care plan. Again, time trend and benchmark for that particular metric. Next metric down is patients identified as having a CPR discussion or decision. Time trend again, benchmark again for that metric. So they flow horizontally in terms of being able to see the time trend and the benchmark, and then vertically the metric changes each time. And the final metric is the percentage of all deaths where the patient was identified on the other 3 metrics above. So they are on the gold standard framework, they have had a CPR discussion or decision, and they do have an advanced care plan in place. So usually, a particular practice, PCN or place will have different values for each of the individual metrics, and then by the time you combine them up into the total for the 3, that usually is a little bit lower because the number of patients who've had all 3 of those, a GSF, advanced care plan, and a CPR discussion is always slightly lower. So that's something we would expect to see. And then just underneath those, again, is the PCM metric comparison. So same data again, but just in a tabular format, just so you can see, and you can break it down into individual practice levels. And there's a couple of notes in a text box underneath that just tells you a little bit about how the averages are calculated. So that's the PCN view of the same information. I'm just going to, for completeness, show you the practice level. So you'd be pleased to know it looks exactly the same again. But this time you get an extra drop down, so you select your place first. I'm going to do Sefton again just because for completeness, and we were South Sefton PCN for that one. And I'm going to select the practice within here. I'm just going to really boringly go for the top one in the list, the 42 Kingsway. Summary for the latest quarter, the 4 metrics and how and what performance is. It's a percentage, so those numbers are all percentages. And this time when you look at the practice level, what you get is, rather than you see the trend for 42 Kingsway for that particular metric, so the percentage of patients on the GSF, and then rather than the benchmark being different PCNs or different practices over time, which would be really busy for some of our PCNs, you've got a lot of practices in them, we've done a comparison to the Sefton average, so you can see the trend for 42 Kingsway, and you can see the trend for Sefton. So you can see for this particular metric, 42 Kingsway generally perform lower than the Sefton average, and you can see the Sefton average had seen a period of improvement, and it's pretty much stabilized at this point over the last few quarters, whereas it's slightly more variable at practice level. You will see that a lot, and that's because of sometimes the size of the practice and the numbers of patients, kind of affected by, who warrants an end of life kind of conversation. So you can see the performance generally kind of tracking the Sefton average, slightly more volatile, and something has kind of changed in the last couple of quarters where the number of patients being identified has slightly declined. Might be worth a look. Same thing again as you work through the screens. Each new chart is a different metric. So you've got the advanced care plan here for the particular practice, advanced care plan metric here for Sefton overall, CPR discussion for 42 Kingsway, CPR discussion for Sefton overall, and the combination metric that looks at all 3 for the particular practice, and then the combination metric for all three metrics for SEFT and for the place as a whole to understand that. Same thing again where you've got your PCN comparison, and it just confines itself to the particular PCN of the practice that you've chosen. So it kind of sits there and you've got the four metrics. If you just use the bar here to scroll across. If there's any metric, if you're staying within BIP and you want to view a metric in more detail, it's not quite showing, everything on one page, you can try and use the zoom to see if that makes it any better. If it doesn't, if you hover over in the top right hand corner of any of these tables or charts and you want to look at those in detail, you can copy the image, just that image alone. I'm going to show you in a second how to export a full report, but if you weren't interested in doing all of everything in there and you just wanted this table, you can copy as an image and paste that into wherever you want. I'm not going to wait for it, it's just going to take a second. Or you can go into focus mode, which will just show that table in totality and none of the other visuals. If you then think, fine, that's fine, I've had a good look at that and I want to go back, top left-hand corner, back to report, and all the way back we go. I'll show you it again, but just if you wanted to look at a particular chart in more detail. And there it is for that particular practice. It's rather large and a bit busy. I wouldn't recommend doing it for everything. Just going to make that nice and big again. And you can also, so that's a chart currently, but you could also do things like show it as a table if you prefer to do that and select those kind of options there. Other than that, I'm not gonna, there's other options in there, but they're less useful. So what I am gonna complete with is showing you how to export it. So we're currently on a particular practice in a particular PCN in a particular place, and you might just want to run this off as a one page or a couple of pages because of the size of it, a couple of pages PDF. So the easiest way to do that is the export at the top, select the PDF. That's probably the best way of viewing it because PowerPoint tends to be, it just exports them as kind of separate images and ends up being quite landscape on PowerPoint, whereas its viewing here is kind of portrait. So we found that exporting it as a PDF is a little bit better. So I'll just show you that again. We literally went to the top menu here, export, clicked to drop the export down, clicked to select PDF. We're going to export it with its current values. If you export it with its default values, it'd probably give you like the very first ever metric for the first quarter, but we want it with the current values to make sure it reports absolutely everything that we've got. And we only want to export the current page. If you don't click that, no worries. All that happens is you'll end up with all of the previous pages that we've looked at as well. So it ends up quite a big report and ends up with far too much information in there than you need. You probably only want to see this particular practice. And then click the export button. You can see the export is in process. It says it takes a couple of minutes, depending on your kind of network speed and things like that. It doesn't usually take that long. I can see there's a comment in there around in the chat about can the report be updated to say advanced care plan, not advanced care plan. I can absolutely take that back through the program group and see if they're happy to make that change. That's no problem. And you can see that the PDF file is now ready for download. It's popped up in my download section. If this menu here doesn't pop up for you in your browser, it will usually be somewhere in the top row here where you can see downloads. They'll be available. You then have options in terms of what you want to do with it. So you can open it, you can save it, or you can share it directly. I usually open it first and just check that it's doing what I've asked it to do and that I've clicked everything that I want to click. So it's now opened in Adobe PDF Reader. It looks pretty much exactly as it looks on BIP, but what you can do from here now is it's all showing there, and you can then decide to kind of save that or forward it from there. What I will do is just save it so you can see it. I'll just pop it on my desktop. It defaults to say end of life live connection. You can call it whatever it is you want to call it. You could call it end of life because we selected a particular practice. You might even want to put the latest quarter in there so that you know this is the latest report. So it's 2025, 26, quarter one. And then if I go to my desktop, there it is there, sat at the top there. And I'll open it again just for completeness. And you can see it's open there. You've now got then a file that's on your desktop that you can do what you would normally do with it. You can kind of share it with someone over email or whatever you would usually do to kind of share that with colleagues. You can even, if you're using Microsoft Teams, you can click and drag it all the way across into a chat. I'm just going to do it now and drop a copy into the chat of this meeting. So you can do things like that as well. I'm going to delete it because it's for one particular practice, but you can kind of see how easy it is to do that kind of activity within the report. So where are we at? We've got 3 minutes left. I'm really happy to take any questions. We've recorded the session for anyone who joined us a little bit later. We've recorded the session from the start and we'll share the recording afterwards. But I'm happy to take absolutely any questions at all. Or if anyone would like me, because I've got it kind of live on screen, if anyone would like me to click edit it for their particular practice and have a look at theirs, no problem to do that at all.
Becky, could I interject before other people come in with questions? We've got a slide to share, which has got the QR code on it, hasn't it?
Great,
for people
thank
to
you,
request access for it. So Kath's even better than I thought she was. So Kath's got that on the screen. So if you don't currently have access to the dashboard, you can either follow that link there, or if you've got a mobile phone in your hand, take a picture of that QR code and it will take you there. Or you can email the email on the screen and they'll send you a link to that form really to request access for it. So I've been managing quite a few over the last few weeks. I've done some presentations to a couple of our locality groups. Lots of new people have signed up to it over the last few weeks, and hopefully finding these new reports for the PCNs and for the practices useful. So I think if we left that on screen for people to kind of, they can use a QR code for the next couple of minutes and whatever. But Becky, if there are questions in the chat that you want to pick up.
Okay. I think I've picked everything up as we went along. We've talked about the recording. There was one there about kind of naming conventions around advanced care plans. And there's a final one there around a link, which is on screen right now. So other than that, I don't think there are any more questions.
No. It looks like you've met everybody's learning needs.